Tonight, as you know, you are here to hear and see Martin Kiierszenbaum, whose Wikipedia entry says he's a musical artist. But he really is so much more. He is a singer, multi-instrumentalist, producer, songwriter, label executive, performer, MC. Went by the name of MC Chili Dog. We can ask him about that. A publisher, husband, father, and a very nice guy. We could say he's a very nice guy. We should note who he's worked with, or some of whom he's worked with. Sting, who he also manages, Lady Gaga, Tattoo, Keen, LMFAO, Disclosure, Ellie Goulding, Feist, Robin, Samantha Fish, and that's just the tip of that proverbial iceberg. He has also worked at ARB Recordings, Polygram Music Group, A&M, Warner Brothers, Interscope, and Geffen. He founded the Cherry Tree Music Group company, working with and in addition to Sting. They have Shaggy, Michael Einziger of the band Incubus, Hannah Breyer, the Lost Bandoleros, Sophie Gray, and the Detroit Dreamers. So a guy I'm happy to call my friend and happy to have here to speak to you tonight. Come on out, Martin.
I was hoping you'd just keep going and do it.
And do the whole thing?
Yeah.
All right, well, welcome back to town.
That was an illustrious introduction. I'm glad I couldn't hear much of it back there. I wouldn't have come out, probably.
You're an illustrious person. So no,
That's
we're happy to have you. One of the things that's always impressed me about you is the range of what you do, and that there isn't a separation in the way you approach it. Talk a little about that and how you view this in a holistic fashion.
Okay. First of all, I got to say something about you, because you were very nice to me right now. So when you were 6, you were writing about my band, probably about 30 years ago, when I was playing around here in Ann Arbor and stuff, and always very encouraging and supportive and very musical. And I'm very grateful to you for that. So it's my honor.
Pleasure.
And I also want to thank Gary, of course, Stacy, and Hassan, and Jeffrey for having me here, and thank all of you for coming. So to answer your question, you know, I got into music by playing and listening. My parents paid for piano lessons, which I know is a privilege. And the neighborhood teacher insisted on my sister and me taking theory classes at the same time, which was a big deal. I didn't know it at the time, but we'd take an hour of piano and an hour of theory. And so she introduced me to the building blocks of music as I was learning to read and to play. And I didn't realize it was shaping the way I looked at music, and I started to listen to, especially pop music. I was really drawn to it, even though I was playing classical at the time. I started listening to music and dissecting it without knowing it, you know, because she gave me the ability to understand the building blocks. And I think from there, I just thought, well, I could probably dismantle anything and rebuild it. I kind of had this delusion. And so that included liaising and interfacing with club owners about my band, or talking to journalists about some of the initiatives we were doing musically. And so for me, things developed at the same time. So when I went to work at a record label in LA, I was a musician, but I was also in the music business. You know, I never really delineated a difference. And like I said, maybe that's delusion, or maybe that's an advantage, but I became kind of the bridge between musicians and music business representatives, and the other way around. So I feel like maybe I got a chance to develop those skills simultaneously, and so I never thought about them as two different things.
So how does that manifest itself now in running Cherry Tree and producing the records, working with the artists, and then doing your own music? How does everything weave together?
Yeah, so the Cherry Tree Music Company is a company I started in 2005. Our first ever release was by an artist named Feist, Canadian artist. And yeah, she's amazing. And she really set the tone for the label. I'm very grateful to her to this day. She called it, we had a joint venture with Interscope at the time, which is part of Universal. And she called Cherry Tree a mom and pop shop inside a department store. In that we had access to the worldwide reach of Universal, but we were able to treat our artists, you know, like hand-blown glass. We were able to sort of accommodate their particular needs. And that kind of gave me the she's very articulate, she's very poetic, so it gave me the nomenclature I needed to really establish that philosophy. And so to answer your question, it's a place where musicians are welcome, where we allow musicians to explore their vision, and even if it goes edgy or sometimes falls off the edge, and our job is to communicate what they're doing to the market and to business partners without distorting it. So where I think those skills come into play is to be able to understand, be patient, protect their musical initiatives, but also communicate their intention, or try to, as best as we can, to the partners that are helping promote and market it.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Let's go back to East Lansing. What were the gateway drugs, if you will, but in music? I mean, what told you what you wanted to do?
Yeah, there's so many things. Mrs. Green, my piano teacher, was a big deal because the music theory was a revelation. It wasn't just playing the notes on the page, it was understanding why the composer put them there. So I'm very grateful to her and my parents for, like I said, subsidizing the piano lessons, which is no small thing. You know, a lot of people don't have that luxury, so I'm grateful to them. Also, they allowed me, my sister became a classical musician, and we're 3 years apart. She's my little sister, and we took piano at the same time, and we were kind of conspirators in music, you know, and it was nice to have a partner in crime like that at the house. But one thing my parents let me do, and let her do, is we could play music any time of the day or night. We could set up in the living room. We could play we had a basement. So she might have a quartet in the basement. I had my rock band in the living room. They let us keep a drum set there for 6 months. They never cared. If it was noisy, they ignored it or something. They were scientists, by the way. My dad worked at Michigan State. So I'm also grateful to them because they gave us this ultimate freedom to explore the craziest, you know, musical ideas, and never, ever gave us grief about it. You know, also, if we had a gig on a holiday, they never complained. You know, if my sister's playing midnight mass at the Lutheran church, we'd all go see her. It was a very open environment. My parents used to host the New York Opera Company that would come and perform in East Lansing for like 2 weeks. But, you know, in order to fund it, they couldn't pay for the hotel, so people would volunteer their houses. So I'd be living next to a choreographer one season, or next to the tenor who was doing Carmen. They just made it very easy to be exposed to music. My parents are from South America, so they were playing records from the Caribbean, from South America, from Europe, from Italy. It was a really cacophonous kind of place, but also very understanding and welcoming.
Tell us about your first band.
Oh my God, they were terrible. It was in high school. I think they were called The End. Yeah, we played school dances after the football game. Yeah. I was always kind of entrepreneurial. You know, I always thought, let's put on a show. And there were a lot of kids that looked at me like I had 3 heads, you know, like, you're Martian, what are you doing? But I always had some sort of idea that it might work, you know. I think it was like guitar, piano, keyboard, and drums. And I played the bass with my left hand. There was no bass player, which is kind of ironic, because now I tell Sting that, right. Yeah, you know the joke about how many bass players it take to screw in a light bulb? None, because a piano player can do it with his left hand. Where's Elu? Is Elu here? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. This is an incredible pianist, you guys. Elu is going to be opening on the whole Sting tour starting tomorrow here in Detroit.
So with your Michigan State connections, how'd you wind up at Michigan?
So it's really simple. I wanted to be as close as possible to Hamtramck, Detroit, St. Andrews, all the places I could play with bands. Was it called Henry's Palace? Yeah, I was in a band called Custom Blend. We used to play there. It was before the internet, so you know I wanted proximity to music, to the music business. And East Lansing was like, it was a great place to incubate, but it was an hour and 20 from Detroit, you know, and it just felt so far away from the music business. And everybody there also thought I was crazy to want to be in music, you know. There was an Oldsmobile plant, there was Michigan State, there was the government. So if you didn't go to one of those 3 things, you were kind of a dreamer and nuts, you know. So I just felt like, I know Michigan wants me to say it was a school, but it was a great school, I had a good time, but it was the proximity to Detroit. That's why I came.
So what did you do? And I know you spent a lot of time here. Recount some of your adventures.
I mean, as much as I could, I'd get over here, you know, whether it was to like go see Tiger games or like, what else did I do? We played St. Andrews, go to Greektown. What else did I do musically? Well, Henry's Palace. Is it Harry's Palace? Henry's Palace, I think it was called. It's a long time ago. Whenever I could, I'd go see shows. Like the first time I ever saw Sting was at Pine Knob. And I think I was telling you, I went by myself because nobody else would go, and I snuck into it was like, there's a shed, so I had tickets in the lawn, but I kind of found a stub, and I, wormed my way into the thing, and I saw it from the 5th row. I mean, all sorts of things, whatever I could do to be close to the music, in Detroit.
But when you say we, who were you making music with?
That's interesting. Myself a lot, because I always leaned kind of pop. Like, I like rock music, but I always like melodies and kind of catchy things. And at the time, I wasn't super cool around here, So a lot of people looked at me like people were in rock bands, or they were like in prog rock bands, and I was trying to make 3-minute pop songs. And you still listen to music. And so I was always a little bit alone, and in a way it helped me learn how to multi-track and how to produce and how to engineer. I saved up in about a 4-track, a Tascam, and I learned how to ping pong tracks. So not a lot of people, and then once I had the songs, what I would do is I would just beg musician friends to help me play it live. So that's, maybe that's different how people come up, but I kind of incubated, I woodshed.
And then there was Maroon, a rap act.
Yeah, so I met a really talented rapper from Chicago in Michigan. He was a freshman, I was a sophomore, and we were at East Quad dorm, but it had a music co-op. So we met at this we had a studio. And he had some amazing, rhymes. And so I just started sending him the music, and we formed this group called Maroon. And it was one of these things where it was like, what's your favorite color? I said, yellow. He said, what's your second favorite color? Maroon. That's our name. And then we put out a record, and it got reviewed by, I don't know if you reviewed it or not.
I wrote about it.
You wrote about it, yeah. Robert Christgau reviewed it in the Village Voice. And that kind of that also gave me a taste of, wow, maybe we could do this. I think we were 19. And then we would take the bus to New York and just walk around and try to meet people and go to 4th and Broadway and try to go to Def Jam and try to get in the music business.
So it's a very innocent entree into the business. What did you learn then? What did you expect it, and what did you find was a reality?
Yeah, we had no idea what to expect, other than hip hop was just so exciting and fresh at the time. There was an innovation every week. It was like, oh, that LL Cool J record featured horns, or Rakim was doing inside rhymes. It was just an exciting time to even be a little part of it, and it was hard to be making hip hop from Michigan, because it was all very New York centric at the time. But we met people, and we got some support here. There's a DJ called The Wizard on WJLB that would put us in his mix show sometimes. We had a song called Baddest and the Hippest, which is really fast rhyming. And he supported us, and we got some press, and it's funny, we didn't really make that big of a dent. We did some bilingual cuts, and one of the tracks we did in Spanish and English got played on Univision, and so that gave us a lot of notoriety, but we didn't really, it kind of stopped. We hit a ceiling. But the one thing that did happen is there was a young guy who was coming up in hip-hop in Michigan named Paul Rosenberg, who ended up managing Eminem, with whom I ended up working later. And I was running the international department for Interscope Records when he was breaking. And because I'd been in Maroon, Paul had heard of me. And it established a quick trust, which then enabled me to work with Eminem and him for, 15 years. And so Maroon did open that door. He was like, oh, you were doing hip hop when nobody even knew what hip hop was. So he thought that was credible.
Now, you have another band you work with on occasion now called Detroit Dreamers.
Yeah.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't. The roots of that were.
But I'm
were
the
in Ann
Andrew
Arbor.
Ridgely of that band. The George Michael's out here somewhere. There he is, Tony Lake. Yeah, I just hold a guitar and smile. Yeah, so that's basically, so Tony, dear friend of mine, Grammy winner, engineer for lots of people, great mixer, great writer. He and I kind of grew up together from when we were about 17, and we always loved the energy and the urgency of the MC5, the Stooges, and we kind of had a band from the beginning. We never really played that much, but we, just for fun, we'd get together in the garage and play crazy, kind of garage rock covers. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we decided to put it all on tape. And we put out this Detroit Dreamers record, and Jeep was putting out a guitar with a luthier called Wallace from here. They make guitars, they're great. And they wanted to create a campaign with the Wallace Jeep guitar which was using repurposed wood from old municipal buildings in Detroit, which we loved. And they wanted us to write a song for it, because they liked that we were Detroit Dreamers and we were repping the area. So we got kind of woven into this big campaign for Jeep. Like literally, I think we sold 2 records, but for some reason they liked our esprit. And we ended up playing the plant, the Packard plant, right? Yeah. And you came to that. And what was cool about that is you came to rehearsals the night before, and you encouraged us to do an MC5 cover, which we weren't going to do. And then we did it, and then I think Stacy posted it, or you posted it, and then Wayne Kramer liked it. So that was a huge, yeah. It's bigger than a gold record, Tony. You should turn in your Grammy. You don't need that now.
So you knew from a young age you wanted to be in music in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it captivated me like nothing else. And it seriously kept me out of trouble, because it's all I wanted to do, is learn how music is made, how to play instruments. I used to borrow friends' instruments so I could learn them, and how does the music business work? That's all I wanted to do. It was really an obsession. Still is.
What was the hardest instrument to learn?
Well, I'm okay at all of them. Piano's the one I really studied properly, but any instrument that was hard, Gary, I just quit. I don't play violin. My sister's a great violin player. I wouldn't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. It's a nightmare. It sounds like I'm torturing a cat when I play the violin. That's hard, violin.
So taking the step into the industry, literally into the mailroom, how did that happen?
So after I graduated from Michigan, I wanted to go, again, to get closer to the music business. I was either going to go to New York or LA, and I applied to grad school at NYU, Tisch School, and USC. And I was going to go to NYU because my mom lived in New York, so I thought that'd be the easiest thing. And USC paid for a trip there. I went there, and it was like palm trees and sun. And a guy from Michigan was pretty impressed by that. But I thought, no, I'm going to go to New York. And so I was getting ready to go to New York. I was in Ann Arbor. I was playing with my band, and we were just going to close up shop, and I was going to move. And I get a call from Tony, who's moved to LA like 3 weeks before me, right? And he's like, dude, when are you coming out here? I said, man, I'm going to New York. I don't know if I can tell the full extent of the story. But anyway, he gave me some incentives to come to LA, and he said...
I think we've got to have the full extent of the story if you've introduced it.
He just said, it's different times now, but he said, sun, palm trees, and girls, is what he said. Okay. So, and we're single and we're young, so excuse us. And in that order, though, you were very, very, you were very proper. So I said, you're crazy, and I got off the phone with him, and then somehow it was like a worm that was kind of in my ear going, wow, Tony's there. Oh, and he said I could sleep on his floor. And he was in an apartment sharing, with a roommate, and you'd just been there, like literally you don't have any furniture or anything. So I called my mom like 3 days later. I'm not coming to New York, I'm going to LA. I don't know what it was. His call came at the right time, and I remembered my visit. To be honest, I was more interested in the palm trees than the girls. Although I did meet a girl, then I married her, so it was a good move. So yeah, I moved and I stayed at Tony's place, 10 days on the floor. And I started the program at USC, which was night classes, 7 to 10 p.m. every night. And that allowed me to get a job in the mailroom, which USC helped me get by contacting an alum that worked at Polygram. And he signed a band called LA Guns. And he saw me for like an informational interview, and he was really nice, and he wrote a little note about me. And I ended up getting hired first as an intern by Ed Eckstein, who ran a record company called Wing Records. He had Vanessa Williams and Tony from the Bay Area, and then that led to a job in the mailroom. And now I was making money, so I could move out of Tony's place and get an apartment.
Do you think it would have been different to go to New York rather than working in the LA side of the industry?
I don't know. I know that the people at Tisch were really nice. They'd heard all my music. You got to come here. We heard they were quoting lyrics and stuff. They really wanted me to go. The big difference was that I went to Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, so it wasn't a music program. So that was the big decision. It was sort of it kind of probably led me to the music business side, because it wasn't a music, whereas Tisch, they were going to focus more on the creative side. So probably allowed me to develop these other disciplines that I use now, communications management, communications technology. I took classes on communications law. And it was with people like USC does now, and Wayne State does too. It's a lot of outreach into the community. There were a lot of professionals that would come and speak at the classes. And in fact, that's kind of how I got my job. I met Bob Scoro because he was an alum. So they have a lot of tentacles into the community, and it really helped me. So I don't know. I don't know how life would have, I probably wouldn't have met my wife if, we're going on 30 years being married. So that would have been a drag because I like her.
So how did you climb out of what was the path out of the mailroom?
I was sending out resumes because, obviously I wanted to get closer to the inner workings of the label, although you learn a lot in the mailroom, by the way. One thing I've learned is that you just got to stay aware wherever you are. Like, you can learn a lot from wherever you are, even if it's not your ultimate goal. Because I did learn a lot in the mailroom. Because everything that was being sent out, and back then it was all physical, right? There weren't all these emails and stuff. So, we had a really bright light. You could see through packages. You see what people sent. Or when they sent records or where they were sending to, then, radio stations, things like that. It was useful. You could kind of follow a campaign by following the timing of the mailouts. But I got a call from Warner Brothers Records, and they wanted, and they were looking for an international publicist. And they'd found my resume, and they liked that I spoke different language, because my parents are from Argentina, so I speak Spanish. They liked that I spoke Spanish, and they liked that I typed fast. Because this sounds old, but like there were no fax machines yet, believe it or not. There was no emails. I know, there was a time where that didn't exist. And they had a machine called the telex. And basically you had to type, it was a little bit like DOS code. It was like code, and then in between you put your messages where they were being sent, and then they would send them out kind of like a group text, right? And so they wanted someone who could type fast, because the head of the international department liked to dictate. And not a lot of people could type fast. And I had taken typing in high school. So I was pretty fast. And I had taken it with a friend of mine, and we were really competitive, so we got really fast. So they gave me a typing test, and they're like, "You're hired." And I went to work for a guy named Tom Ruffino at Warner Brothers Records, and he would have me do two things. He would have me stay late and type telexes that he would dictate. This is the head of the department, so, anything like, we're sending a note to Germany about the new Madonna video or the new Prince tour or whatever. It's like I was just like soaking all this information. And the other thing he'd have me do is answer the phone and say to his wife that he was already on the way. So lie to his wife and type fast. That's what I needed to do. So I stayed there for about 2 years, and I learned a ton. And I got to be around all these amazing artists, Prince and Madonna, and they flew me to Minneapolis to film a show, and Chris Isaak and the Replacements and REM and Paul Simon, Rod Stewart, Neil Young. I did a photo session with Neil Young. I'm 23. It was amazing. Yeah.
So seeing all that, what did you begin to focus on the most effective way to work with an artist and to help an artist convey what they're trying to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was very lucky because Warner was probably the best record label that ever existed. So far, right? Things have changed. But it was run by a guy named Mo Austin. He used to work for Frank Sinatra. The A&R was run by Lenny Waronker, and all these legendary figures like Ted Templeman, who produced all the Van Halen records. And those guys were all around. Lee Hirschberg was the engineer for Van Halen, was downstairs. He had a studio. And they were all really welcoming and kind, So for like a young guy, I'd be going to deliver something, and they'd be like, "Come in here, listen to this." It was super cool. I guess I had a lot of mentorship in that way, or at least access. People maybe didn't directly say, "Hey, I'm going to teach you this," but they would say, "Hey, I'm going to be editing this live record by Devo for a Japanese release. Come on in and listen to it." I was like a huge Devo fan. I'd seen him at the Lansing Civic Center, so, and they were kind of like, "Hey, this band, how does this sound to you?" And all of a sudden, like, I'm getting solicited for opinions at Warner. I don't know. It was a lucky thing, but being in the right place at the right time. But also, I did leave everybody I knew and drove my car. You have to do things, right, to engender those opportunities. But then, it's also good fortune.
So what was the first spotlight moment where, you were hands-on with an artist that everybody else, in the room might go,
Well, definitely at Warner, I went to a photo session with Madonna, you know, and
Good Detroit girl.
yes, yeah. In fact, she knew I was from Michigan, so she was kind of, you know, like winking at me during the photo session. I'm just like freaking out. So I got to be around her tour. I think it was when she was. The song was called Hanky Panky, and she did that movie with
Dick Tracy, yeah.
Yeah, she did Dick Tracy. So I was around, I got to see the inner workings of a big, fat world tour. You know, I had access pass, and I was setting up interviews with like international journalists there. So that was a pretty incredible opportunity to see how that machine worked. Dancers, band, set list, you know, guests every night, cameras. It was very educational.
When was the opportunity to work creatively?
Oh, that didn't happen until later, because at Warner, I really was trying to deliver what they hired me to do, which is international publicity. So I was dealing with all the Warner affiliates around the world. I was writing a lot, whether they be press releases or bios, communicating success in the US so they can then amplify it around the world. So I was really trying to do my job there, and then at night I'd go make music. I never stopped making music. I was always writing songs and doing remixes and things like that. I was playing out. I'd play out in Hollywood. You know, I'd get a couple friends and we'd play like the Central and all these places. But it wasn't until I got from Warner, I got a job at A&M Records, where I met my wife actually. But the culture there, because A&M had just been purchased by Polygram, was again a separation of business, marketing, promotion, and the creative. And I'd come in to run their international department, so again, I was focusing on my job and making music outside. It wasn't until I got to Interscope and I went to work for a guy named Jimmy Iovine, who noticed right away that I was musical, you know, and I was going home to do music. And he's like, why don't you do that here? You know, we got a studio, you can use it whenever you want. When you're traveling around the world, see if you can find something we could, you know, sign something that we could sell here. He was the first one to say, join your two interests for the benefit of the company, which I appreciate. But it ended up working out for the company too, because it wasn't like I had to, you know, you spend a lot less time on other things when you don't have to divide your life. And he knew that. He knew that if I felt comfortable, I'd just work 24 hours a day, which is what I did.
So who'd you get in the studio with first?
So it's funny, I was running international for Interscope, and so I'm trying to sell M&M records and Dr. Dre and Black Eyed Peas and Vanessa Carlton and a lot of incredible hits. Limp Bizkit was massive, and I was flying around the world with all these bands trying to get the Universal affiliates to sell these outside the US. And Jimmy said to me, hey, when you're out there, see if you can sign something that we can sell here. And so I knew the Interscope was like the market leader in hip hop and alternative. You know, we had Queens of the Stone Age, Nine Inch Nails. So if I signed something like that, I was going to be last in line, because all the other A&R people were very accomplished and they were signing things in that area. So I decided to sign an opera singer, which is probably the stupidest thing ever. And it was a good-looking tenor from Siena, Italy. His name was Alessandro Safina. But I just had a feeling about his voice. And I was like, hey, Jimmy. And he's like, what? And I said, you know, whatever. It's an open lane, whatever. Well, how are you going to market this? And I said, well, this is the first thing I ever signed to Interscope. I said, well, I see that like Bocelli sells with a PBS special. So can you give me some money to make a PBS special? He's like, all right. So he gave me a budget. Yeah, he really thought I was crazy. So, but he was like, okay. So, and I mean, Jimmy's one of the most successful record business people ever, right? He's got a great nose, great ears. So, and we were super successful at the time. So he's like, I'll give this guy whatever. And if he fails, I fire him. You know, he didn't care. So he gives me this budget. I shoot this PBS special in Taormina, Italy, with this singer. And it's scheduled to come out all over PBS on September 11th, 2001. Right? So, so it airs, but the way PBS specials used to work is they gave you free airtime on all the affiliates, and then they would do a pledge drive. And depending on how much money you generated for the stations, that's how they decided whether to air the show again. And what happened with Bocelli is people gave so much money, they kept airing it, and every time it airs, you sell music, right? So you make money. So I was like, well, this plan is foolproof. You know, he's good looking, he's great. He looked like George Clooney, and he had a beautiful voice. So, and I loved his music. I love his voice. It wasn't like I just loved the music. It moved me. So the thing comes out, no one's giving money to Alessandro Safina PBS special. They're giving money to New York, obviously. So it was a complete failure, right? And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done as an A&R person. At least I got my job in international. I'll be okay. So Jimmy calls me into his office like 3 months later, and he's like, great job on Alessandro Safina. And I'm from here. Like, that's a sarcastic comment in Michigan. I'm like, oh. I'm like, okay, thanks. And he goes, I'm serious. I go, are you making fun of me? He goes, no, man. You sold 250,000 copies of Alessandro Safina in Holland. And I said, yeah, because the song Luna got on the air. There's like a AC station, and it just went crazy. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, I don't care where you sell them. Just sell them. Do more. That's what he said. So Holland saved my life. Yeah.
Lady Gaga is a big point on the resume. How did that come about?
Yeah. Well, it's important to know that in between Alessandro Safina and Lady Gaga, there was an artist I found in Russia. And again, I went to Jimmy, who's my boss, and I said, hey. And he's like, do they speak English? I said, no. And he said, what? Okay. I'm really grateful to him because he would make assessments based on your like crazy eyes. Like he didn't have to hear it. He'd be like, if you believe in it, go for it. I don't know if there's that many executives like that anymore, but he was one for me. And so I signed this band from Russia, and they're called Tattoo, and they had a song called All the Things She Said, which I ended up co-writing. Because again, Jimmy's always encouraging, contribute all your skills to this company. Don't go outside and write for something else, do it here. And we ended up selling 5 million records. So after that, it was do more. And then I signed a band called Keen, and that sold 5 million records. And so then I was cooking at that point. And then there was a gentleman named Vincent Herbert who had signed an artist named Lady Gaga, but he had gotten her from Def Jam Island because she'd been dropped by L.A. Reid. Yep, and it's not really his fault. What happened was there was an A&R person that worked for him named, hold on, what was his name? Because he's talented. Joshua, we got to look that up later because he deserves credit. But he had signed her, and then he got laid off. And when he got laid off, his artist got dropped, and she was one of them. So like he feels really bad now, but I think it was one of those things, they got caught in the administrative thing, which is horrible. That can happen to artists in big companies. But it was lucky for me because Vincent Herbert signed her and then had a joint venture with Interscope. And he couldn't get anybody interested in the whole Interscope ecosystem until he came to Cherry Tree. I already had my Cherry Tree venture then, and he said, hey, what do you think of this? And I was like, this is cool. It's like David Bowie meets Prince. And then he brought her over to my office, and then I loved her. We actually got together to write together. Oftentimes I'll do that, like I'll work with somebody musically to kind of see what, if I'm the person to work with them, great. If not, I'll know somebody else. I'll go. But when you get under the hood, you kind of know, okay, you need this producer, or you can do it yourself, or So I did that with her. We had a great session. We actually wrote a song called The Fame, my first session ever, which ended up being on the album, and it was called The Album. But Vincent said, hey, if you can help me with this, we'll put her on Cherry Tree too. And it ended up being a joint venture between 4 labels. It was Interscope, Vincent's label, Streamline, Cherry Tree, and then Akon, Akon's label. So that's how I became friends with Akon too. Yeah, and then it went berserk. But it wasn't easy at first because I wrote 4 songs on that album with her, and then nobody really was interested. It was very different to what sonically was happening. And I remember, because I knew people internationally, because I'd been working things internationally, I called up the Swedish company and I said, hey, what do you think of the song? A song called Just Dance. And they were like, well, if you send her over here to do promotion, we'll put it out. It hadn't come out in America. And so I sent her over there, and the thing went #1. Like, boom. So now I had a story, so I called, I think it was Canada Next. This guy named Jeremy Summers there who ran promotion. He said, I love this song. And I said, well, your market's really tied to America. Like, all the stations report to the same charts and everything. Yeah, but if you send her up here and you give me some time and you let me put out the record before America, which, can you believe that now? If you Google, Lady Gaga's album, The Fame, came out 3 months in Canada before it came out in America. That would never happen now, right? Because of DSPs and whatever. And he took the Just Dance to #1. And in fact, the first station that ever played Just Dance in America was a Buffalo station, because they were getting requests from people that had heard it on Chum FM in Toronto. A lot of people don't know that Lady Gaga broke out of international first. Yeah. Anyway, that was a long answer. Sorry, Gary.
No, it's okay. And I want to get to questions very soon, but you know, the reason you're in town this week, of course, is Sting and opening his tour the next couple nights at the Fillmore. How did that relationship happen?
So when I went to work at A&M, which then got folded in Interscope, so that relationship just kept growing, I was Sting's international publicist. And in fact, the first thing I did at A&M was set up some interviews with some Dutch journalists. There's Holland again. At the Fox Theater in Atlanta, and I met him and I met his whole team. And that began like a really, you know, I think this is my third year working with Sting in one capacity or another. And he's a wonderful person beyond being, you know, incredible artist and a philanthropist and an actor and a great writer, a great musician, great bass player. He's also a wonderful human being. And he appreciated my contributions over the years, and he kept asking me to do more. First at the record label, and then when his manager retired in 2016 to be his manager, which is a great honor, you know. And I think that was one of the few reasons I might leave my job at my venture and my job at Universal, you know, because I was like, this is a real extraordinary opportunity. So I left after being there 25 years, and I went to manage him, and so it's been 8 years, and he also invites me to collaborate with him in the studio. It's a great honor.
I was going to point out that there is a new single.
Thank you,
and,
Gary.
guess who's playing organ?
Yes, I'm on the organ. Yes, but Sting wrote it. I think he gets more credit. But Tony did me dirty on that session, because Tony engineers a lot of the sessions with Sting, and he's launched a new initiative, which is a 3-piece, as you know, Sting 3.0, which he's debuting in North America in Detroit tomorrow. ELU's opening, and I was producing the record, so I was really trying to keep it to the 3-piece. And Sting says, "No, I think it needs an organ part." I said, "Man, this is 3.0. It's not 4.0. No, I think it'd be exciting in the choruses." And I said, "Okay, well, what would you like me to play?" You know, because he's a musical genius, so it's like it's a tremendous privilege to work with Sting in the studio, right? Especially because you always learn something. And he said, "Look, why don't you just play through the song?" You know, normally I'm a keyboard player that thinks about a part kind of. And Elu, you relate to this. It's like you think about a part like an arc in the song. You know, you're going to do things that maybe little motifs that are going to repeat, whatever. But he asked me to just play through it, which is an opportunity to just rehearse and try things. So you're not really tracking a part. You're trying different parts during the song that you're then later going to track. But I didn't know Sting made a little signal to Tony to record my little, you know, first take. So I'm messing around. I'm doing crazy stuff. I'm doing like, you know, glissandos everywhere. And the song ends. I go, "Okay, I'm ready to cut. I think we got some ideas." And he goes, "No, that's it. Print it." So that part on the song is a one take. So I'm going to give you the finger later. I thought you were my friend.
All right, let's get to some questions. I would encourage you not to be shy. Jorg, for recording, do you want to take the microphone into the crowd? See, thought ahead. Okay, who's first? In the background.
Oh, that's yeah. Big time. As someone who's moved around and like been in unfamiliar places, how do you go about kind of staking out a career besides just like sending out resumes? How do you find places to search for? How do you like really dig into, this is unfamiliar space, where should I be applying, what are some ventures going on, and exploring a new scene that you maybe are just entirely out of water with?
That's such a perceptive question, actually. And it's interesting because that is a big part of it, is stepping into environments where it could be like really scary. You know, I mean, for me, I moved to California, and luckily I had Tony, who had been there for 2 weeks, so it wasn't like we knew much about it. But yeah, I think I can give you a philosophical answer and I can give you a more pragmatic one. But the philosophical answer is I just say yes to a lot of things, even if it petrifies me. You know, like this. Gary's like, "You want to come talk?" I'm like, okay. And then things end up happening. I feel like if you put in energy into the world and you say yes and you put yourself in situations where you might be a little scared, something good comes out of it. You might meet someone or or learn something that might inform you later. But in terms of like resumes and stuff, you know, meeting people, trying to reach out to people that are doing maybe what you might want to do or similar to what you might want to do. You're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of people ignoring you. But every once in a while, there might be somebody who remembers what it was like and might see you. Like I said, I had an informational interview. There was no job available with Bob Scoro, who had signed LA Guns. And he was a USC graduate, and he took pity on me. He's like, I'll sit with you. And I must have said something that impressed him, and he wrote a little memo that went around the office, and Ed Eckstein read it and said, oh, I need a guy to get me lunch and answer the phones, and he called me. And that was my foot in the door, you know. That's the other thing, if you want to be, like for instance, you know, I always wanted to be in music. I didn't necessarily want to be international marketing. I didn't even know that existed. But when that job became available, because I could type fast and I could speak Spanish, I took it. You know, I was like, okay, I'll be at Warner, I'll be in there, might meet somebody, you know. So probably opening up and trying things and not getting thwarted when you get rejected or nobody answers, or, you know, what did Winston Churchill say? That success is going from failure to failure without being discouraged. That's the definition of success. I just think a lot of successful people just fail a lot, you know, and they don't stop when they fail. I don't know if that answers your question. I gave you kind of a hippie-trippy thing, but yeah, just reach out to people that are doing close to what you might be doing or in proximity you might want to be doing, and just see if you can be of service to them.
Okay. End of the road here. I'm going to make you work around as far away as you can.
That's great.
He's running.
How do you specifically deal with that kind of fear in unfamiliar situations? Is there any little thing you do, or do you just
you
kind
guys
of go for it?
So, you know, I moved all over the world when I was a kid, and I had to go to schools where they spoke different languages. And there was, I think now maybe there aren't, but it seems like there are more programs to kind of integrate people into different classes. Or with me, it was like my parents, you know, I was born in the US, we moved to Argentina when I was 1. I'm in school, I'm speaking Spanish. I'm writing in Spanish. Next day, I'm in Switzerland, and the teacher's speaking French to me. I'm 7 or something. And then we moved to England. And now I got to speak English, you know? So maybe I got tested in that way, so it didn't feel so daunting. But it's a great question. You know, I had something that was really important. I had a grandmother that like thought I was the greatest thing in the world since I was a kid. Like, she just told me I was the greatest. So I'd go to school, you know, and somebody would go, you know, someone would call me a racial slur or something, you know, or like, you're this, you're that. And I remember thinking as a kid, my grandma thinks I'm great, and she's way cooler than you. You know? And it's amazing that I had the even wherewithal to think that, but she gave me so much unconditional love. It gave me a lot of confidence to sort of withstand, because you're going to get hazed everywhere. You know, there were no anti-bullying, you know, and we moved a lot in the States, and I was always the new kid. And I was foreign, and my lunch smelled different. My parents had accents, and I guess find some sort of inner philosophy or confidence that you got to remember, everybody walking into a situation would feel the same way, right? And everybody at one point did the same. So these are really good questions, by the way. It's really important, because none of what I'm talking about happens until you conquer that, you know. And not be afraid to fail. I know it sounds hokey, but it's true. Everybody, it's okay to say I don't know too. I tell you what, I've had a lot of opportunity to work with very successful people, right? Like Sting, one. He's the first person to go, I don't know. I don't know, how do you do that? What's going on there? I don't understand. It's amazing to not be afraid to look foolish like he doesn't know. Of course he knows so much, but, you know, and I've gotten to spend time with Bono, does the same thing. What did you mean by that? I didn't understand that. Seriously, they're not afraid. Obviously they're so accomplished, no one's gonna think, oh, you're a fool for asking that. But I feel like they were always like that, you know? It's okay to not know. It's okay to maybe feel confident being a stranger in a room. It's okay. Like, I don't know you guys, I'm here. I'm just being myself. Some of you guys will leave and go, that guy was full of crap, you know, but I'm doing my best.
Three seats over.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I have a pretty similar story to you. I'm a current music student at the University of Michigan's music school, and I'm studying classical music, but I want to go into contemporary music. So this year's kind of like a transition year for me. So I guess my question would be, how did you go about transitioning from classical to contemporary music?
So are you going to University of Michigan right now?
Yes, I'm a senior.
Oh, thanks for coming all the way. What is that, 35 minutes? That's a lot. That's a great question. Tony and I talk a lot about this because we were both music majors at University of Michigan. And one thing that was good back then is all our classes, our musicology classes, our ensemble classes, our music theory classes were all integrated. So there were classical musicians, performance majors, voice majors, musical theater majors. Everybody that wanted to get a music degree had to be in these classes, and we're all together. And I was just talking about this with you guys, your dean. Sometimes people are siloed, and they're competitive, and it's not supportive. And we had some of that, but we also had some people that took chances, We had some classical musicians that would like collaborate with us, or vice versa. I was lucky because I took formal piano lessons, and we had to be competent on an instrument to graduate, even though we were theory majors, but we had to play. I think hopefully it's opening up, because I think there's a lot of crossover happening. So I'm hoping classical musicians are becoming a little bit more open, pop musicians are becoming more open. I think the reading thing's really important still. Like, it can be useful, it can be used as a bridge. Like I was telling a story. So a few years ago I managed Shaggy and I managed Sting. I introduced them to each other. They had met before, a long time ago in Europe. They'd done a song together, just live. They'd been in the same place in Belgium at the same time, and I think Shaggy jumped on stage and did Message in a Bottle. And they hadn't talked since then. And so I reintroduced them, and they became really, really good friends. We did a song together, which ended up being an album. They won a Grammy. It's about 5 years ago. And they're going to actually play a festival in Florida together. They're going to headline a reggae festival on March 13th called Reggae Rise Up. And it's cool because they don't do a ton of gigs together, so that'll be a special event. But we were recording a song, to use kind of as a... One thing I like to do is I like to have singles for tours, not necessarily albums, right? I think it's a whole different world now. So this single that we have out with Sting really launches the tour. He doesn't have an album out, but he's got a tour coming, so it's kind of a calling card for the tour. So we're trying to do the same thing with this Sting and Shaggy collaboration, and Shaggy's in this session via Zoom. I'm engineering, because Tony wasn't available, doing something more important, with Sting. And Shaggy's trying to convey to him that he needs to be like more in pocket, on the beat, whatever. And Sting's trying to get it, and so I go, oh, you got to do a quarter note, then a dotted eighth. And Sting goes, I got it. So I think it's good to be a little bit of both. And if you do that, you'll find yourself needed in a room. Does that make sense? So instead of stressing about how do I cross over, see if you can be of service in that sort of nexus. And eventually someone will be like, hey, we need that person because she knows how to do this and this. I find if you're out there hustling enough, if you put yourself in rooms and say yes and say, hey, can I help? Eventually people will go, oh, you're useful here because you can speak both. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good luck.
Third row, center.
How do I get to stand up? This is the cold row. All right. Hi, Martin. Thanks so much for coming here. I was really excited and a little nervous to come here. Didn't know what I was going to get, but Gary is amazing, and we support the Detroit Music Awards, and thank you for being here. My question is, so coming from a working artist like myself, who tours, writes their own music, several albums, owns their catalog, has placements with notable artists, how do you get someone to solicit your catalog further? How do I find a music publisher? Because I just keep getting the door shut. I contact all kinds of people, and honestly, what I have found that worked is that sometimes artists just contact me through one of the sample packs I released or something like that. And that has been very interesting. But, we're trying to figure out, my husband and I write everything together. It's a whole family business. How do we take it to the next level and find someone to publish our, a music publisher and help someone solicit our catalog?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're already doing something right, which is publishing yourself. You're putting things out there. You said a sample disc. You're putting out calling cards, right? So you're hanging a shingle so people will see it. So that's already important. But also, publishers, they range from super conservative, so some are more, or not as risk adverse. But it's been difficult. That business has been kind of contracting a bit, even though people have been doing a lot of acquisitions of catalogs. But in terms of supporting and developing new writers, that has become a little more scarce, even though there are some exceptions at the publishers of people that really do help and develop writers. But one of the ways you could do it, to answer your question in a very kind of specific way, is to reach out to like-minded artists or people that you enjoy their music, whether it's DM or however you can do it, right? You can reach most people nowadays, and some people won't answer you, but if you try enough, and sort of say, can we collaborate? Maybe it's somebody who already has a publisher, and then you deliver a great song for that publisher, and that publisher goes, oh, that collaborator helped you achieve this. Maybe I'm interested in that. That's just one way. It's hard to break in. It sounds like you're already doing a lot of the good things, and you just have to persevere.
Right.
I know.
Exactly. I mean, I'm doing that. Artists will, contact me occasionally, and they'll hear something I did, and then, it turns into something else,
Amazing.
But we just need more of that, and I guess more connections, and, it's very difficult, and to exploit all of our music on the next level. Like, we tour, I have the same agent I've had for 10 years, and I contact other agents. So it's constantly, it's like just staying here, and you inch a little bit forward, and then you inch back, and then, it's a struggle.
Well, Gary gave me a really great intro, but that encapsulated literally 35 years. So it sounds like it all happened right after, but it was a lot of failing, But the other thing is, you might want to think about physically going places, right? And having, I was just in Nashville, right? I made some cold calls, right? Now, obviously, I have a bit of a resume, so people are like, oh, let me see what this guy's talking about. But I find that there's some people, maybe they're up and coming, whatever, at BMI, at ASCAP, at CSEC, I don't know who you're affiliated with, or definitely at those places, right, who are encouraging new artists all the time. They're actually pretty good at it. Or publishers, where they might just meet with you. Hey, I'd like to learn more about what you do. I'd love to share some things, get your opinion. So not apply the pressure, but say, I just want to know you. And I find that most people will be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Sure, I'll spend 20 minutes with you and have a coffee. Maybe go to LA. I think when you're there in person, it's helpful. I know we live in a world where everything can be accomplished by Zoom, but I'm not sure that's the case in reality. So I think you need to amplify or keep doing what you're doing. I think what a lot of people don't talk about is stamina for artists. Artists, it's really hard to acknowledge that that's part of the equation. And I have that even with some of my younger up-and-coming management clients. It's like, we'll get a break, we'll get a tour, there'll be an initiative or something, and then they're like, want results. And it's like, you may not see the results until we do 2 more things or 10 more things. And you might be frustrated. And you're leaving DNA, you might not know it. You might be playing for somebody, and then 5 months later, they think of you. That's kind of the gig for a musician, and it takes a lot of stamina. And,
hand the microphone to your left.
but it's a good question. It's a good question. But it sounds like you're doing a lot of things right already.
Yeah.
You've worked with a lot of people that eventually rose to the top, like Lady Gaga. Could you tell at the beginning that that's where it was going to go? And the converse question to that is, are there other artists you've worked with that you were convinced they were going to go and just didn't?
Yeah.
Like, did you know that in that moment that it was going to be that big down the road?
Yeah. In 35 years, you make a lot of mistakes. I didn't sign things I could have that became huge. Luckily, I signed some things that became huge, so you don't suffer those as much, because, I remember I signed Keen, right? They were managed by a young 26-year-old manager who had gone to school with them. His name was Adam Tudhope. He was in my office all day long. We sold tons of records all over the world. And he signed another band. He said, Martin, I really want you to sign this band. And I had a band already on Cherry Tree called Noah and the Whale that I really believed in. And they were making kind of folky, they were from England, the folky music. Most people haven't even heard of them, which is fine. So his band that he brought me was a lot like Noah and the Whale. And I was struggling. It was tough to resonate in the marketplace, and I felt like I was letting him down and couldn't crack it. So I was like, Adam, man, I'm not going to sign your other band because it's very similar to this band. And he's like, man, I think something's going to happen with these guys. So they started getting some traction in the UK, called me again. It's like, Martin, I really think you should sign this, you know. And I was like, man, no, I got Noah and the Whale. So Daniel Glass from Glassnote offers him a record deal, right? And Adam calls me. And I remember, I've sold $5 million for Adam on Keen. So he calls me and he goes, for the love of God, I have the deal from Daniel Glass in front of me. I will rip it up, and you need to sign this. And I said, will you leave me alone with this Mumford & Sons band? I'm not going to sign him. So I didn't sign him. Of course, Daniel Glass sold millions, and that's it. But then I signed Ellie Goulding, and I signed Disclosure, and I signed LaRue, and Far East Movement, and LMFAO, and it worked out. So no one thinks about that. Shaggy always says, everybody remembers your successes, they don't remember your failures, so try. You know, which I think is good advice. But yeah, of course, made mistakes, you know. But on some things, I really felt that it was going to happen, and so I invested, and I chalked that up to the fact that it takes a team, right? So maybe my combination with that artist yielded the success, and maybe if Mumford & Sons signed to me, it wouldn't have worked. Daniel Glass did a great job on Mumford & Sons, you know, and in America. He had him for America, and because Communion did an amazing job, and Polydor, and was it Polydor? Whatever the record label was, did a great job. So sometimes, like, people, like with Lady Gaga, she'd been dropped, you know, and she met me, and it just connected. It worked, you know. It was simpatico. We had similar musical tastes, and it worked. So sometimes it's meant to be. But yeah, it's painful when you miss.
Speaking of decisions, you weren't involved in the Sting and Lute album, were you?
Well, here's what happened with the Sting Lute album. He came, I was his A&R person, and he said to me, Dominic Miller, my guitar player, whom if you're going tomorrow, you'll see. He's one of the three in 3.0. Dominic Miller gave me a lute, and he told me this in his apartment in London, and I'm going to make a lute record. And I said, oh, okay, what's the repertoire? And he said, well, it's going to be John Dowland music from the 1600s. And I was like, don't do that. And he goes, I'm making a lute record. And I said, really, can we think of something else? Anything, you know, Appalachian clogging, can we, you know? And I was kind of joking, and he goes, look, man, I'm making a lute record. So when Sting tells you he's making a lute record 3 times, you say yes, because he's been right. That record sold 1 million records, Gary. It sold 1 million copies, the lute record. So, I don't know. I think people get high to it. I don't know what it's like bird sounds in between. He reads letters from John Dowland. It's pretty cool.
Let's see a hand over here.
Hi, I just want to thank you for coming out and speaking.
So nice, thank you.
I really appreciate it. My name is Isabella Lindo. I'm a freshman here at Wayne State, and I'm majoring in business to have a business background as I go into the entertainment industry. And I wanted to ask if you had any tips for aspiring music artists like myself that make hip-hop and R&B music.
Yeah. The difference between now and when I started making music is that you can actually self-publish. And by that I mean you can put out music, right? You can get on Spotify and Apple by yourself. The threshold was very high when I started. You had to save money to pay for a studio. There were no DAWs. There was no computer that you could, personal computers that you could record on. You had to get in a studio. And it was very expensive. It might be like $2,000 for one day. And you're lucky if you finished one song, and then you had to mix it, so you need another $2,000. It was really hard. So we would play live, save money over several months, and then, okay, we got to record the song in one day, and then maybe you didn't nail the takes, or you ran out of money before you finished tracking, or you couldn't afford the mix. And then from there, you had to send a demo tape, and then a label had to sign you, and then they were able to get it into retail, and all these things had to happen before you could get your music heard by people. And although there's a lot more competition now, because everybody can get published, it's much more empowering for the artist, right? You could piece together a PC, get Cubase on it, whatever your program of choice is, make a record, upload it yourself through TuneCore, DistroKid, Symphonic, so many distributors, and at least have it published. And then when you're playing, point to it and go, you can click here and listen to my music. You can consume my music. Now there's other issues, right? Like you could sell a CD for $10 in my day. Now you're getting 0.00001 cent every time a stream happens. But at least you can get your music heard, and you don't have to have a gatekeeper ordain it. So I think that's very powerful. Now you have to cut through all the clutter because everybody can do that. But at least it's very empowering. I mean, back when I was starting, if you were from Hungary or if you were from, I don't know, Singapore, it was going to be really hard. You weren't even going to get it to someone who could be an A&R person to sign. It was very, very difficult. And now at least you can be anywhere and you can record something with good quality and you can put it up for people to absorb, and then hopefully cream rises to the top if you're consistent enough. And there's the stamina again. So I would take advantage of that. I would make records, put them up, support them how you can, whether it's additional social media content or playing live, and draw attention to those releases.
Hey, thanks for coming. This is awesome.
Thank you for having me.
So you wrote on the Tattoo record, which I imagine opened up all kinds of doors on a 5 million selling record, probably making more money than you ever made before. Maybe not.
Do you guys have a class on the business side of the music?
Different times.
I did okay. I did okay. You're right. I did okay. I did okay because I ended up co-writing that big single.
Yeah.
But I wrote it with a lot of people, and it was my first sort of. It's a long story, but you know, sometimes you have to sort of take what they give you at the beginning to establish yourself. So I'm not complaining. Sure. I did well. But yes, it wasn't like I could retire after that, yeah.
But so that probably opened up publishing deals or possibilities of writing more. Did you think that's an avenue? Or did you think, you know, if I'm A&Ring people, more opportunity to write for people I'm signing? What was the thought process on?
It doesn't work like that when you're an A&R person. People think that way. But when you're an A&R person, you have to have a hit or you're fired.
Yeah.
Right? And you have a certain amount of time to do that. So you can't afford to be like, well, I wrote this song, so I'm going to make it sing, because it might not be the best. I'll give you an example. I was writing with Lady Gaga. We wrote a song called The Fame. She has this whole concept. I'm going to call it The Fame. It's going to be about, you know, getting famous and this and that. I want to sound like Prince and whatever. And we ended up doing 4 songs on that album together, right? She nicknamed me Cherry Cherry Boom Boom. I put out music under that name. She did it extemporaneously at a session. But I picked the singles, and I picked Just Dance, written by Red One, Akon, and Lady Gaga. I didn't pick the 4 I wrote. I'll tell you why. It was way better than my songs. And then the second single was Poker Face, also written by Red One. So I just wanted to parenthetically say that. Just because you're an A&R person, you got to think about what the gig is at hand. You can't be like, oh, let me use this because you will not have a gig like that. And I won't name them here, but there are executives who have tried that, and they're gone.
Yeah.
You can't. But absolutely, if you have any kind, a modicum of a hit, you can parlay that into something else because you have a track record.
Sure.
You know, I remember I got a chance to write with Madonna in 2015 for her album Rebel Heart. And she loved the Tattoo song, you know, and she loved Lady Gaga. So of course, she's like, oh, we write. Now she was writing with a bunch of people, so it wasn't just me. Went to New York, worked at Alicia Keys' studio, Jungle Room, and she said, bring a top line writer you like. And I said, okay, I know this young artist named Ali X. I don't know if you guys have heard of her. She's great. You know her? Yeah, she's awesome. You can talk. So you have a microphone. Look at you. Okay, but here. Yes, but here's the sad part of the story. Madonna's people looked at that and said, she doesn't have enough credits. We don't want her to come. So I was managing an artist named Natalia Kills at the time, and she had more credits. And I said, what if I bring Natalia? She wouldn't let me bring LAX, and I tried. So I ended up writing a lot with LAX after that because I think she's so talented, and I felt bad about it. And I don't even know if it was Madonna's choice. It might have been Guy Osiri. I don't know who was assessing it. But I brought in Natalia Kills, and we ended up writing a song that got on the album called Holy Water. And then that led to Natalia getting invited to write on Rihanna. And then she got a Grammy nomination. So absolutely, that's how it works. It's very hard to get your foot in the door. You just can't stop. You just can't stop. And it's so easy to stop, right? You got rent. You got your parents telling you, what are you doing? It's so hard. It's so hard. I'm not suggesting it's not hard. But, you know, if you stick with it, every once in a while you'll get some little element of encouragement, and that gets you to the next little spike, you know? I understand. And by the way, it never stops. Never stops. It's always the same. Because as much as people go, oh, wow, your resume is great, I have people going, oh, that was, Lady Gaga was 2009. What are you, that was back then. You know, so I still have to prove myself all the time.
Gentleman down front here.
Okay, hi, my name is Cameron Mayfield. I'm a producer, I'm a pianist, I'm a drummer. So I saw this video of Timbaland, great producer, and his partner, now Zayd, it's this site called Suno AI, and it's basically where you can like put like any beat or song or like an instrumental part, and like AI will like put like vocals on it and like expand it. So my question is, what is your thought of artists using AI in today's music landscape as like, not to like replace human creativity and expression, but like as a tool? So what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's, I think, one facing all of us. I think everybody has to make a personal decision. There's a couple implications to your question. Number one, if you're using AI, AI is using you. So you have to be okay with that, right? So if you're harnessing what AI can do, it's taking all your ideas, right? It's putting it into its database, which are then shared with everybody else. So you have to decide whether you want to do that or not. I have a personal opinion about that, but it's personal. Everybody has a different idea. I think any kind of tool is something to explore, but that's one ramification. Another is the fact that AI is taking, well, so far, maybe they'll tweak the algorithms. I'm sure it's probably happening right now, but it's taking everything. So it's taking crappy stuff, mediocre stuff, and good stuff, right? So the amalgam right now is somewhere around the mediocre mark, right? And we all got letters from AI, and they're written by AI. Now that might change. It probably will change because people are working on that, right? There has to be something built into the algorithm that makes an assessment. But also that's difficult because music is cultural, right? Music is dynamic. Music is itinerant, right? You can't say, oh, I'm going to predict that this is going to be a hit because human culture is moving all the time. Zeitgeist is moving. So maybe they'll figure out how to program that. I don't think they have yet, or at least I haven't seen it. Maybe it's been developed in, Microsoft. Maybe. So it's a great question you ask. I don't have the answer. All I can do is approximate a personal answer, which dictates how I'm going to approach it. But I think everybody has to do that on a personal level, as a musician. There's a philosophical component to that. So that's what I'll say. I'm not informed enough about it to say, well, this and this and this. I'm just kind of sharing with you guys some of the things I think about when I'm faced with people using it or the opportunity to use it. I don't know. I've been very careful about it for those reasons.
What do you still want to do? What's on the list?
Oh man, that's such a great question. But I really want to do what I'm doing. I dreamt about doing this. I dreamt about living and breathing in music, making music, talking about music, helping people make music, protecting people that are making music. I just want to do more of it while I'm around. Really, I enjoy it every day. I don't ever think it ever ends.
And given all your accomplishments and all your expertise, who's going to win the Super Bowl?
This is going to be a controversial pick in this room. It's going to be the Lions.
Martin, thank you very much. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Hassan. Thank you, Jeffrey.
If you bought a ticket for the VIP reception afterwards, that'll be held in the gallery, which I think is that way. So go there. And, Martin will, as a bonus for splurging for the VIP ticket, will sign you to Cherry Tree.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, did I not tell you about that?
Yeah.
Thank you all again for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you.